Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I will be discussing my top 10 favorite fantasy series of all time. And the reason why I'm deciding to make this video right now is because that I just finished a new favorite fantasy series that will be included in my top 10 at the number 10 spot. Just made the list, so I figured why not update people on what my top 10 favorite fantasy series are. If you've seen, fantasy discussions in the past on my channel, probably a lot of this list won't be very surprising, but like I mentioned, I do have the number 10 spot that is brand new, and I have a couple of honorable mentions that are new. So why not go ahead and make this list? Obviously, this list is subject to change, but I will say that probably my number 1 and number 2 favorite spots are pretty permanent. Like, I don't really see those ever changing. And then my top 5 is fairly solid as well. Like, I don't see a lot of that changing anytime soon. But 6 through 10, definitely some variability there. Like, that could change with time, with me checking out more fantasy series that I could potentially love even more. Or, I go back to reread them, which I will do next year, and we'll see what happens. So with all with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the list. So like I mentioned, for number 10, this is a fantasy series that I just finished that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really love this series, and I think I will like it even more, love it even more on a reread, which will probably be a few years down the line, but I really enjoyed the series. And that would be Dagger and Coin by Daniel Abraham. Obviously, the first book being The Dragon's Path. And this series I really loved, especially for the characters. I will say, throughout the whole series, this series doesn't really revolve necessarily around the plot. Obviously, things happen in this book, but I would say the strong suit of this series are the characters. You really get a good sense of who they are as people, their motivations, their wants, their faults, like their weaknesses. Like, you really get a good grasp of who these people are. And these people, like at the beginning of the series, book 1, they're in such different parts of the world and different parts, like just as humans, like what they're doing in life. But throughout the series, they slowly converge on each other and then slowly diverge and maybe come back. But like, it's interesting to see how these characters align with each other and to see like their decisions and like how it changes the it's hard to talk about it without spoilers, but really, like I mentioned, this is all about characters, and the plot in this book is still really good, even though it is very slow moving. It's very slow moving plot. It's still very good in my mind. It's hard to even say necessarily what this series is. Like, it's a lot of politics and, weirdly enough, a lot of like financial economic decisions, because one of the characters is a banker, Cithrin, who is probably one of my favorites in this whole series. But you're also following some royalty members, and then you're also following some military guards types of people. And again, they kind of just converge on each other in interesting ways throughout the whole series. It's a 5-book series. I will say book 2 was the only book that I gave 5 stars to. The rest of the books I would say are more 4.5-star books. But like I mentioned, I think if I go back and reread the series, I'll like the characters even more, and I'll get a better sense of like what the series is and where it's going. I did really like the ending and just the series as a whole, so I think these books could become 5-star books on rereads. But for now, amazing series. I think Daniel Abraham, I'm going to check out a lot of his other stuff as well. But yeah, Dagger and Coin, definitely deserving to be at the number 10 spot on the list. And the rest of these series, I would say, are more old favorites. Like, I've read them, I've reread them, most of these, and I really enjoy them. But I will say for number 9, it is a series that I plan on going back to reread in 2026 to make sure that I still really enjoy it. I think I will. It's definitely a series that I would, in the past, I would have put it in my top 5, but it's dropped down a bit for now. just because I don't remember much about it, honestly. And number 9 would have to go to Witcher. So like I mentioned, this used to be a top 5 favorite fantasy series. When I finished it, it was in my top 5. But that was like probably 8 or 9 years ago at this point, almost a full decade ago. And I really enjoyed it at the time, but honestly, this series as a whole is very blurred in my mind. I remember major plot points, but I don't remember a lot about the series. I remember the characters, obviously. You got Geralt, the Witcher, obviously. You got Dandelion as his companion, kind of the foil to him, if you will. Tons of great characters and side characters, and just really interesting stuff that happens in this series. A lot of unexpected stuff too. It's a weird it's one of the more unique fantasy series that I've read, and it does have a prequel novel. I always forget what it's called. It's something to do with ravens. I do want to read that next year, and then, like I mentioned, reread the whole series just to get a good grasp on where it sits on my top 10 list. Like I mentioned, this could fluctuate, but for right now, just a safe bet, I'm going to include it at the number 9 spot. I really did enjoy the series when I first read it, and I think the highlight of the series really are the short stories and novellas in The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. But the 5 novels that we get, and also the prequel novel, are all really good as well. Great characters, and I love the series, but I need to go back and reread it. Number 8 on my list, possibly my favorite fantasy trilogy of all time, would definitely have to go with Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Now, like I mentioned, probably my favorite fantasy trilogy of all time. I will mention another one in my honorable mentions later on in the video. But this is just one of the better trilogies I've read. Because sometimes trilogies, like, sometimes the first book can be amazing, and then book 2 can be great, and then book 3 can kind of be a letdown. I would say, for the most part, this is a very equilibrium trilogy and series. Like, all of the books are fantastic. Kind of the one thing that bums me out a little with the series is that book 3, while the ending is good, it's not exactly what I wanted it to be. So for that reason, I think Poppy War is like a 5-star book. It's my favorite in the series. I love the introduction of Ren. A lot of people hate Ren, but I love her character so much in this book. And I kind of like the dichotomy of like the first half of the book, kind of a more school setting, which normally I don't love in fantasy books, but I think it works well in here. And then the second half is very much a contrast between that, because it's just all out war, very depressing and really dark stuff. So I love that contrast. I love this book. Dragon Republic is kind of the fan favorite, which I can understand why. It's a great book, but those are both 5 stars. And then the last one, The Burning God, is amazing up until the very end. I will say the ending is good. It's just not what I wanted it to be. So for that reason, it's more leaning on like 4.5, maybe even like 4.75. So it's a near perfect trilogy, which oftentimes you don't get. So I love like an equilibrium fantasy trilogy. And yeah, it's just one of my favorite fantasy series, mainly because of the character of Ren. She's one of my favorite fantasy protagonists. I know she gets a bad rap by a lot of people, but I love this series so much, and it's overdue for a reread. I need to reread it eventually, maybe next year, because I'm doing a ton of rereads next year. We'll see, but for now, number 8 is the Poppy War trilogy. Number 7 on my list is Mistborn, but not Era 1. I'm talking about Era 2. And if you've seen my unpopular opinions video, you guys know that I love Era 2 more than Era 1, which is definitely unpopular. So many people love the original trilogy. For me, I love that first book, Final Empire, but then book 2, Well of Ascension, is good. And then Hero of Ages is my least favorite Cosmere book that he's written, that I've read. But for me, Era 2 is just consistently great throughout. It's a 4-book series, all amazing, all really fun books. I love the character duo of Wax and Wayne and all of the adventures and crazy stuff that happens in the books. I love those two. And then there's great side characters as well. I love the use of the Mistborn magic system, but having it be in a Western setting with firearms and guns and how that interacts with it. I just think it's really fun fantasy series written by Brandon Sanderson, and I love it more than Era 1. Again, unpopular, but I just think from the first book, like book one is probably my favorite, but also The Lost Metal is a really standout ending, also just as great. Books 2 and 3 are still great, but I think I love books 1 and 4 the most in that series. But it's just a really fun. It's just that's the best way I can describe it. It's really fun. Sometimes in a fantasy series, an author can kind of forget to have like fun stuff in their books, but Brandon Sanderson does not. This is a very fun fantasy series. Very cool. Number 6 on my list, we have Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. And this is obviously the first book, Age of Myth, which is probably my favorite in the series. It's kind of a running gag for me with fantasy series that oftentimes book ones are my favorite in the series. Not always, which we'll get to, but a lot of the times it is so. I just love the introduction of these characters. I also love, like, basically the first chapter in this book is where all hell breaks loose, and I love when just series in general can have that kind of first chapter. Really, the introduction of this is you have runes, which are kind of humans essentially, and then you have the Frey, which are kind of like elf-like, god-like creatures. These runes view the Frey as gods. But in the first chapter, you get this one rune named Wraith, who manages to kill one of these Frey, one of these gods, and all hell breaks loose because these Frey are seen as immortal beings, but Wraith kind of just kills one, and yeah, it just goes from there, and there's so many great elements to this book. It's kind of a really cool blend of like classic fantasy elements with all of these different tropes, but with a more modern writing and more modern storytelling. And of course, with all of these fantasy series, I love the characters. Wraith and Malcolm, great duo, but then you also get characters like Persephone. You've also got Suri and Mina, which are fan favorites. Like just all across this book and the whole series, great character work. And I also appreciate when fantasy series can have shorter installments. All of these books are basically between like 400 and 500 pages, so it's a 6-book series. They're all fairly short, especially for fantasy, so you can read these very quickly. That might sound a bit hypocritical when you get to some of my all-time favorite fantasy series, but I do appreciate when authors can have a little bit of brevity and a little bit shorter books. But yeah, this series just in general, I will say not all of the books are 5 stars. Like Age of Myth and the last book, Age of Empire, which is a fantastic conclusion, are both 5 stars. The third book, Age of War, fan favorite in the series, 5 stars. And then the other books range from like 4 to 4.5 stars. Not perfect all the way through, but still one of my all-time favorites. So number 7 on the list, Legends of the First Empire. Sorry, number 6 on my list, Legends of the First Empire. And now we're cracking into the top 5. I would say for right now, this is a very solid top 5. I don't really see this changing anytime soon unless I just come across something that's just so great. But we'll see. So for number 5, I'm going to have to go with Song of Shattered Sands series by Bradley P. Bulio. Obviously, the first book being 12 Kings in Sherikai. Again, a 6-book series. Although for this one, I think all of the books are either 4.5 or 5 stars. Just really solid fantasy series. And it's one of the more unique ones because if you can't tell, it is kind of a more desert setting. And it's also featuring one of my favorite fantasy protagonists, Cheda, who is an assassin. A lot of the times I don't love assassin fantasy, but I think with this one, the assassin fantasy works really well because it's blended with other stuff. Like you've got horror elements in this, you've got mystery elements in it. It's got a little bit of everything, and I love this series so much. And not only that, like I mentioned, it is a 6-novel series, but it has several novellas, I think 7 at this point, that all are really worth reading because sometimes you get fantasy and sci-fi novellas that don't really add that much to the story, but the novellas in here I think are almost like you have to read them because they add so much to the story, especially, let me get it for you, especially The Doors at Dusk and Dawn. This is one of the best fantasy novellas I've ever read, and seemingly, because it's kind of just like about a horse race, but it still adds so much to the overall series. But yeah, one of my all-time favorites. So 6 novels and 7 novellas. Honestly, I can't wait to go back and reread this at some time in the future just because it's a really great blend of very different genres. You've got obviously the fantasy, you've got assassin fantasy, you've got horror elements because there's weird creatures that come out in the night. And it's a really good revenge tale because Cheda is basically wanting to get revenge on all of the 12 kings in Cherokee. So a lot of revenge taking place. You've also got mystery elements because there's a lot of mysteries surrounding her mom and some other weird stuff. But yeah, it's just a fantastic time. So 12 Kings in Cherokee, Song of Shattered Sands, number 5 on the list. And number 4 on the list, people might be surprised that it's not a little higher on the list because he's obviously one of my favorite authors of all time. I make a lot of content about his books. So without further ado, number 4 on the list is Dark Tower by Stephen King. Now, I will say this is one of my favorite fantasy series, and it is one of my most reread series. But I think what keeps it from being like top echelon, like 1, 2, or 3, it sits at number 4. The reason why it is at number 4 and not higher is because not all of the books are great. So it is an 8-book series, kind of made up of 7 like original novels, and then an 8th book, Wind Through the Keyhole, which is kind of book 4.5, which, you know, has a little bit to do with the Dark Tower, but essentially the reason why it's not higher is because some of the books are great, 5-star, 4.5-star reads, but other books just aren't my favorite. You've got Wolves of Lakala, which is more of a 3-star book. And then the Dark Tower, book 7, which is the conclusion to the story, is more of a 3.5, 4-star book, which overall I do have a lot of issues with, but the ending itself to the entire series is one of the best endings to anything that I've ever read. So a lot of just juxtaposition there. But overall, the main reason why I love going back to reread these books is because it's so inventive. It blends a lot of different genres, just kind of like Cherokee, but even more so. You've got fantasy, sci-fi, horror, Western. So like you've got all these different kind of elements that Stephen King like combines into this series. And also it's got a really unique feel where every book has its own distinct personality and feel to it. You've got the Gunslinger, which definitely has more of that Western vibe and kind of like, it's just kind of a weird start to the series, honestly. But then you get books 2 and 3, and they have their own feel. And then book 4, which is kind of like a flashback book that has its own different kind of feel to it. And all of the books have their own kind of distinct personality to them, which I've always thought was really cool. A lot of the times with series, it can kind of just feel not monotonous, but it can kind of like feel the same. Whereas the Dark Tower, all of the books kind of have their own feel to it. And another huge reason, same thing with all of these series, I love the characters so much. You've obviously got Roland the Gunslinger, but you've got probably my 2 favorite in the series, Eddie and Susanna. And then there's obviously Jake, great name by the way. And then there's obviously tons of villains and side characters you meet along the journey to the Dark Tower. But yeah, just fantastic series. I love going back to reread them, even though all of the books aren't like as great as like books 2, 3, and 4. And book 6, by the way, which again, unpopular opinion, fantastic book. They're not all 5 stars, but I think the series as a whole is 5 stars just because it's worth the journey, and I love taking the journey. And yeah, it's greater than the sum of its parts, I think is the phrase that I always mess up. But it's a 5-star series, even though the books aren't all 5 stars, if that makes sense. So Dark Tower at number 4, fantastic. And number 3 on my list, in comparison to Dark Tower, which I mentioned, not all the books are 5 stars. All the books in this series, and also just all the books in these top 3 fantasy series, are all 5 stars. So they kind of had to be the top 3. But for number 3, we have Gentlemen Bastards by Scott Lynch, of course. And obviously the first book, The Lies of Locke Lamora, fantastic. This is obviously a 3-book series with book 1, The Lies of Locke Lamora, book 2, Red Seas Under Red Skies, and book 3, The Republic of Thieves. All 5 stars. I know for a lot of people, they love book 1, but they think book 2 and 3 are a bit of a departure. Bit of a departure and not quite as good as book 1. But for me, I wholeheartedly disagree. I think all 3 books are worth reading. I think all 3 books are fantastic. And again, kind of like with Dark Tower, it is obviously a continuation of the series, but I think each book kind of has its own distinct personality. Like book one, you're kind of getting introduced to the main cast, to the characters, and then book two kind of has its own feel because a lot of it takes place on a ship, which is very different from what book one is. And then book three kind of deals a lot with politics, the Republic of Thieves. So each book kind of has its own unique feel to it, kind of like they're each standalones, but obviously it's a series. But and again, it's obviously the characters that really do it for me. Locke and John might be my favorite friendship in all of fiction. It's up there with stuff like Edgar Fremantle and Wireman and just all kinds of friendships, but it's one of the best. And I love the blend, obviously, of comedy because this series is really great. I think it has some of the best dialogue in fantasy fiction that I've ever read. It's got a great blend of comedy and drama and really just crazy batshit moments. And the world building is great, very interesting. It's one of those series where, like, every time I go back to reread it, I pick up on more and more stuff because he kind of slowly jam packs a lot of information into this series that every time I go back to reread it, I'm like, oh yeah, I never picked up on that. But it's just jam packed with such amazing stuff. The one downside to the series is that we've been waiting on book four for over a decade. I'm going to be thrilled to the moon when we finally get Thorn of Emberlane and the series will eventually continue. But for now, it's still one of my favorite series, even though we only have the 3 books. It's a planned 7-book series, but even with just these 3 books, it's one of my favorites. So with all that being said, number 3 on the list, Gentlemen Bastards, amazing series. And you guys probably already know what my top 2 are. I talk about them a lot on my channel, but I'm going to talk about it here again. So number 2 on the list, we have Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second series that he has in my top 10 list. Mistborn Era 2 is great, but Stormlight Archive is always just going to be the GOAT for me for Sanderson. And I think I've told this story before, but essentially I read my number 1 favorite fantasy series, which I'll get to after this. But after I read that, I was just in the mood. I was really craving for more epic fantasy goodness. So I went to Barnes & Noble, and my mission was just to find like a really fat fantasy book to sink my teeth into. And without knowing who Brandon Sanderson was, without knowing any knowledge of the Cosmere, I saw this copy of The Way of Kings and said, ooh, let me read that. And y'all, I dove into this book and I just fell in love with the fantasy genre. Because I will admit, number 1, it is fantasy, but Stormlight just has so much more fantastical elements to it compared to my number 1 option, which you guys already know what it is. But it's just one of the first times when I read a book where like the world felt alien to me. Like this world of Roshar just really exploded my imagination with stuff you could do with fiction. And obviously, like with all these series, the characters are fantastic. You've got Kaladin, Dalinar, Shallan, Adolin, Yasna. Like you can keep going. Lopin, underrated character, but like, actually, I think he's in book 2, right? But anyway, fantastic series. He's completed the first arc of the 10-book series that is Stormlight Archive. I've read all 5 books. All 5 books are 5 stars. I know Wind and Truth, book 5, a lot of people were disappointed by it, but I loved it so much. I thought there was a lot of great moments, especially towards the end. It's still one of the best fantasy series I've ever read still. And obviously I can't wait for book 6 through 10, which is going to take him, I don't know, 20, 30 years to complete probably. I don't know. But I'm in it for the journey before destination. And especially with Way of Kings, like this is probably my second favorite book of all time. The first book being, of course, from my first favorite fantasy series. But Way of Kings just has a special place in my heart. Love this book. And I love going back to reread this series. I think I've read Way of Kings at least 3 or 4 times by now. And it's still amazing. The whole series is amazing. I could go on and on, but yeah, number 2 is Stormlight Archive. And you guys already know what my number 1 option is. But before I get to that, I have 2 honorable mentions that just miss my cut for the top 10. These series are all really great, or both really great, but the Dagger and Coin just beat them out slightly. First one I have to talk about is the Tamir Triad by Lynn Flowing. And this trilogy, like with Poppy War, is one of the best fantasy trilogies I've ever read, especially book one, Bone Doll's Twin. Just one of the more unique fantasy books I've ever read. It's described as like gothic fantasy, and it's just really weird, but it works really well. So this trilogy is amazing. Check it out for anyone who wants a unique fantasy story. And then I've also got Peter McLean's Priest of Bones, War for the Rose Throne, not trilogy, quartet. It's a 4-book series. All four books are outstanding, really great. I will say my one main complaint is that the side characters aren't the best. The main character, Thomas Piety, is one of my favorite fantasy protagonists, but the whole series, the side characters are fine, but Thomas Piety himself, fantastic. So definitely the whole series is like 4.5 stars. Really great, but just misses the cut for being top 10. But now, of course, onto my favorite fantasy series of all time by my favorite author of all time. And this, just in general, is my favorite series of all time, and it includes my favorite book of all time. Of course, I'm talking about A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I'm holding up book 1, but book 3, Storm of Swords, is my favorite book of all time. And I remember reading these books for the first time. Basically, the story behind that is that my dad got me into watching the show, and I binged watched like the first 3 seasons, honestly, in like a couple of days. I was just hooked from the start. And then we watched season 4 as it came out. And after season 4, like the ending of season 4, like I didn't want to wait 9 months to get the rest of the story. So I got all the books and just read them all the way through. And yeah, I've been in love with this series since, like 2014, 2013. And just these books are incredible. And obviously I've mentioned like all of these series have like great characters. Song of Ice and Fire probably has the best character work, character development, character dialogue, just everything to do with about characters. This is my favorite. I love all of the different POVs that he chooses to write in. I know for some people, they have their favorites and they have their least favorites. Like, probably for people, they love reading from like Jon Snow, Tyrion, Daenerys, and then they might scoff at reading like Sansa chapters or Bran chapters. And then in the later books, when they kind of get seemingly random POVs, they might not like that as much. But for me, he just can't do any wrong with this series. I love everything about this series. Perfect. Of course, the only thing not perfect about it is that Winds of Winter is still not out. It's been 14, almost 15 years at this point. But for me, it's still my favorite fantasy series. It still will always be my favorite fantasy series, even if we don't ever get books 6 through 7. I just think it's an amazing accomplishment what he's been able to do with this series and the characters and just the incredible plot, all the crazy shit that happens in this series. Like, it's just amazing. And it'll never be topped in my mind. I don't think I'll ever read a fantasy series better than this. Like, Stormlight is like right up there for me, but I think A Song of Ice and Fire just gets the edge just because not only does it have great characters, it also just has batshit crazy moments, which Stormlight does as well, but like they're kind of neck and neck. But A Song of Ice and Fire is just so damn good. And it also has a special place in my heart because it was my first. Stormlight was my second, but like just everything about A Song of Ice and Fire is just fantastic. I don't think it'll ever be topped. So yeah, number 1, probably for now, and probably, not definitely for now, but probably forever, is A Song of Ice and Fire. All right, so that is my top 10 favorite fantasy series of all time. And to recap, we've got number 10, Dagger and Coin. Number 9, Witcher. Number 8, Poppy War. Number 7, Mistborn Era 2. Number 6, Legend of the First Empire. Number 5, not the book, Song of Shattered Sand series, 12 Kings and Cherokee. Number 4, Dark Tower series. Number 3, Gentlemen Bastards, number 2, Stormlight Archive, and number 1, of course, A Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, that's my list. Definitely let me know what you guys think of my list, whether you agree or disagree with me. Are some of these your all-time favorite fantasy series, or are some of these do you think are overrated? What are your all-time favorite fantasy series? I want to chat with you down in the comments below, so comment down below and we'll chat about it. And of course, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Stay subscribed for more content. I try to post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I've also got the Bookish Charmer Discord where we've got tons of bite reads and read-alongs happening all the damn time. And I've got my Patreon link down below if you want to go support me there for as little as $1 a month. And my Amazon wishlist if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.